And, the proof's in the pudding. Alejandro Mayorkas has perjured himself. He's putting Americans in danger. I mean, opioid deaths have doubled under the Biden administration. And that's hundreds of thousands of American lives at stake here. So I think we must go forward. It's our constitutional duty to do so.
That's Representative Pat Fallon, Republican from Texas, talking about what we're about to talk about with Robert Law. He's the director of the Center for Homeland Security and Immigration at America First Policy Institute. Robert, thanks for being here.
Yeah, happy to be on with you today.
I'm filling in for Annie. My name is Ryan. It's been kind of a last-minute substitution with her having a sick kid right before the show started. So I do want to talk with you about what Republicans have done, which is they've released articles of impeachment against Alejandro Mayorkas over the southern border. Fill us in on what that means.
So this is the formal step for the House of Representatives to begin the process of removing Secretary Mayorkas from his position as the Secretary of Homeland Security. This builds off of months of investigations, formal public congressional hearings, and other document requests and other behind-the-scenes efforts as well. That goes to show that really what's happening at the southern border, it's not because Secretary Mayorkas is incompetent. It's because everything is deliberate, it is intentional, and it is unlawful. And at the end of the day, his refusal to uphold the oath that he has sworn is a dereliction of duty and subjects him to possible impeachment.
So this is something that's been going on for quite a while, and now we're actually seeing some movement on it. Robert, what is this something that is mainly for getting attention onto the border? Because I don't think that it goes to the Senate, and then they probably don't actually remove him. But then we get to see a lot of him on record having to defend what he's done, right?
Well, I think that's right. We'll see what happens in the Senate. But the first step is the House. And at the end of the day, the House of Representatives is the people's house. And they have a responsibility to ensure that the interests of the American people are represented. And so going forward with impeachment is the proper mechanism here. There's only been one instance of a cabinet official impeached in our entire nation's history. Well, what we have going on at the southern border is an unprecedented border humanitarian and security crisis. And so therefore, unprecedented actions are necessary. For over the last 3 years, Mayorkas has had every opportunity to pivot, to reverse course, to utilize all of the policies that the Trump administration had put in place. And instead of doing that, they continue to double down because this is what they want to happen. And so the recourse has to be impeachment.
Robert Law on the phone with us, director of the Center for Homeland Security and Immigration at American First Policy Institute. Robert, we were just talking with Stephen Moore in the last segment about the economy, and the amazing thing is, I don't know that I've seen this really happen very often. Usually the economy is always top of the list, especially in election year, for what voters care about. But at this moment, immigration has overtaken the economy as far as what most Americans are saying this is their number one issue, which means it's not just Republicans yelling this is a problem. This is an American problem now.
Oh, you're absolutely right. And the reality of the border crisis, which, month after month after month is setting all of the wrong records, has literally converted every state into a border state. So this is not just Governor Abbott and, Texans having to deal with it at the Rio Grande. These illegal aliens, we're talking, when you include the gotaways, the people who completely avoided and evaded the Border Patrol, about 10 million illegal aliens have crossed the border one way or the other over the last 3 years. And they are going to every single community in this country, and many of them are draining resources. They are taking over housing, schools. You saw in New York City where, American students were forced to do the remote learning that completely failed them during COVID in order for illegal aliens to take over their school to sleep in. You see overtime being cut for law enforcement in order to pay for housing, feeding, clothing illegal aliens. It's impacting, the American people in their day-to-day lives and in their wallets as well. So it's not surprising that this issue is front and center. And this is exactly what the administration was trying to avoid, which is why they were trying to hide the optics of it. They don't actually view what's going on as a problem. It's just a political issue for them, and they don't want the accountability.
Yeah, Robert, this is, we're news, so we hear the big news stories, and we talk about the big numbers and the figures and this impeachment and all of this. But it's when you talk to people, right around here. I know a couple of people who are in school administrations, for instance. We're very connected to the school world here. We're all married to teachers and stuff, but we have friends who are part of different administrations and things in this St. Louis area. And I'm hearing that even St. Louis area schools, now we're landlocked. We are right in the middle of the country. We are not a border city, or we're not a border state, that they're having to deal with so many illegal immigrants who don't speak English that they can't really figure out what to do with them in the school systems, even in our area. And that it's impacting classrooms because then, of course, if the teacher doesn't know how to speak Spanish, they don't really know what to do with kids who can't understand them. I mean, it's all these little issues that this is causing. It's not just the big headlines ones. It's all over the country, right?
Oh, you're absolutely right, and the schools are really ground zero of those downstream effects of an unsecure southern border because illegal alien children are going into these schools. There's a misguided Supreme Court case from decades ago that allows for this to happen, and I'm hopeful that maybe some states will be willing to bring some sort of litigation to challenge that. But these teachers did not sign up to be ESL instructors dealing with kids who don't know our language, don't know our culture, don't know our history, some of whom maybe have never been in a formal classroom setting before. It's a distraction and it draws down attention from, American students who are already struggling. You see record lows in our critical math and, English writing skill sets nationwide. This continues to harm Americans. And then there's other downstream effects. Your wait in the hospitals and emergency rooms increase because illegal aliens traditionally show up at the emergency room for even routine care because you can't turn them away. That increases your wait time. And then very often these illegal aliens will then skip out on the bill, which then puts the hospitals and the American people inevitably on the hook down the line for it. So again, it's not just raw numbers coming across the border. They're coming across the border. They're going to every single state in the country, and there is a negative impact on many different aspects of day-to-day life.
Robert, I was talking to a buddy of mine probably a couple years ago now about the drug impact that this was having over the border. I would say this is probably about a year into Biden's term, and he's not exactly a drug hardliner. I think he's probably more libertarian, where he's like, look, all this stuff is a little bit overblown. We need to be much more lax on drug laws, things like that. That's where he comes from. At the time, he was saying, it's a little overblown, the amount of drugs supposedly coming into the country. I think Republicans are making a bigger deal out of that. Even recently, though, he has had to admit, yeah, I think that actually has changed, and it is a much bigger issue with opioids and fentanyl. I mean, these are causing so many American deaths that it really is a health crisis now.
Oh, it absolutely is. Fentanyl poisoning is the number one leading cause of death of young Americans age 18 to 45. I mean, we are literally losing a generation of Americans because of our failure to secure our southern border. And when you hear this administration peddle lies that says, 90% of fentanyl comes through the ports of entry and it's largely American citizens that are doing it, that's false. What they are talking about is what they are catching. And of course, you're going to catch most of it at the ports because that's where you have a controlled environment. You have all the scanners, you have the drug dogs. That's a controlled environment. You would expect there to be lots of apprehensions of drugs and other, illicit substances there. What they are not telling you is that as the Border Patrol is overwhelmed dealing with large-scale illegal immigration, that opens up large gaps of the border that is not being patrolled. And that's when the cartels and the smuggling entities are sneaking, very bad actors, our national security threats, our public safety threats, and fentanyl as well. And that is exactly why it is the leading cause of death. If they were catching so much of it and stopping it from coming into the American communities, this wouldn't be the number one killer of 18 to 45-year-olds.
It's so sad what we've even allowed Mexico to become in the midst of all this, because if you were just a citizen of Mexico, watching what's happened over the last 4 years where drug cartels have always been a problem, but now it's as if they control entire areas of the country, especially near the border. man, I would be really upset with the Biden administration if I were the average Mexican citizen. Let me ask you about the battle that was, taking place last week. I don't think it's really gone anywhere, but I don't feel like people are talking about it as much today as they were on Friday. The battle between Texas and the Biden administration. What is the latest? Because all I heard on Friday was that Biden might have blinked on this thing, but where does it stand?
Yeah, so right now, what happened was the Supreme Court ruled last week that the Biden administration was allowed to take down the concertina wire, kind of like a barbed wire material that state officials in Texas had put up to help secure the border that the Biden administration is not doing. But to your point of has the Biden administration blinked, as of right now, the Border Patrol has come out and said they have no intention of doing so. And so you've sort of had this standoff where, Governor Abbott said, I'm going to keep putting this up. And you had a number of other governors come out and pledge their support, said they would bring other personnel and other resources to help Texas in this effort. And really the criticism that Abbott has received by apologists of open borders is saying that, Governor Abbott is defying the Supreme Court. Well, that is not true. Just to be very clear, all the Supreme Court said was that the Biden administration was allowed to take it down. There was nothing that said that Texas couldn't keep putting it up. So if Texas wants to put it up on Monday morning and the Biden administration comes in and takes it down on Monday afternoon, Texas can turn right back around and put it back up again. You can continue to do this game day after day after day. And I think when you saw the sort of this add-on effect of so many governors from all across the country, although notably not the governor of Arizona, who actually does represent a border state, not getting on board with this, he said, are we really going to have the optics of Border Patrol agents cutting down, effective border security systems? And as of right now, we seem to be in a holding pattern. The case is still being litigated in the Fifth Circuit. But, it's definitely something to keep an eye on. And again, I think look at who is not signaling their support for what Texas is doing. And I think that goes to show that if you're not going to be with Texas on this, you are complicit with the Biden administration's ineffective policies. You are complicit with human trafficking, and you are complicit with the cartels.
Yeah. Robert Law, director of the Center of Homeland Security and Immigration at the American First Policy Institute. Last question for you before we run out of time here. This idea that the Biden administration keeps floating that, man, we would take care of the border. We really want to. We just don't have the money. Please give us the money in this next budget, and we'll finally do something about it. I don't know anybody who's looking at that and going, well, that's realistic. But what are they asking for money to do exactly?
Right. So that's where the devil's in the details. They want money to process illegal aliens faster. So the problem that we have at the border, it is not a resources issue. There's not enough money in the world that can solve the problem if you do not change policies. So when they say we need more money and it's Congress's fault, they're lying. They want money to speed up processing, releasing illegal aliens into American communities faster. What they don't want to do is put in place deterrent policies. And so now you have this Senate border deal being discussed, and President Biden has said he would sign it. And if only he had this, he could secure the border. That is also not true. There are a number of authorities that already exist in law, things that President Trump used very successfully that Biden undid on day one, and he continues to refuse to use it today. So there's not another law that needs to be passed and not another dollar that needs to be spent at the border until the policies using existing law are actually put back into effect.
Robert, I said that was the last question, but I lied. I got one more for you. How quickly could either this president, Biden, or President Trump, day one, should that happen, how quickly could they change this constant flow of illegal immigration? Would it take a little time, or could they do it like that?
It would be pretty instantaneous at the border itself. There's a number of authorities, including what's known as 212F, where you can basically turn people away at the border, deny people entry on that. It would probably take, I think it would take a couple of weeks to restart the Remain in Mexico policy, but the infrastructure is already in place from the Trump administration. The hardest part is going to be how do you remove all of the millions of illegal aliens that have been allowed into the country. That'll take a little bit more effort, but I think you would have, an America First administration that would try to use as a force multiplier state and local law enforcement personnel to start ramping that up as well. But again, you have to stop the flow first. That could happen very quickly. You just need to have the political will to do so.
Robert Law is the director of the Center for Homeland Security and Immigration at American First Policy Institute. The website is americafirstpolicy.com. Robert, appreciate your time here on a Monday.
Yep, thank you so much. Have a good one.
Thank you, too.